Lauren Scott, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. And I'll just invite some of our speakers up too as well. So I'd like to invite to the stage Craig Stevenson, who's the president of the Oris Group, Renee Chamas, who's software program manager at Modern Niagara, and John Guardiola, who is senior VP of engineering at Bedrock Detroit. All right. Well, thank you, Scott. And I'm so excited to see this many people out to talk about the opportunity in ESG. And just to put a little pin in that, I did hear a couple of questions yesterday. What is ESG? It stands for the environmental, social, and governance implications of companies. Today we're really going to be taking a deeper dive, quite honestly, more into the E of ESG. And I'm really excited because I think we need to first address the elephant in the room, which is this idea of ESG and sustainability and business opportunities coming together. It might not be the most obvious connection. And even though I have the title of VP Marketing and Sustainability, I'll be completely honest, I'm the first person to say that I'm genuinely surprised about the extent of this opportunity on a micro level for our industry, but at a macro level for the private sector overall. And to explain the surprise, I'm going to start on a more personal note. Because I was 6 years old when I knew that I first wanted to be involved in the environmental movement. I gathered up all of my toys and set up shop in my parents' driveway to raise money for the World Wildlife Fund. And for the years that followed, I'd always assumed that in order to leave this planet in a better place for the next generation, I would have to either work for a nonprofit or for the public sector. And to be honest, this was really the shared narrative for decades in Western society, that if you wanted to have a positive environmental impact, you'd either have to work for a charity or for the government. But something has really changed over the past couple of years. You might even say that this is the dawn of a new era, because suddenly the private sector is emerging as the leading protagonist in the sustainability journey. There are certain industries, being here in Detroit, we can talk about transportation. EVs are getting, or electric vehicles are getting the lion's share of media coverage. You're also seeing sustainability in food and fashion. However, I would argue that it's actually our industry, the BAS industry, who holds the key to truly unlocking the next level of environmental opportunities. If we're talking about the scale of this opportunity, a recent McKinsey report estimated that we're talking about a spend of $1.7 trillion annually between 2020 and 2050 on decarbonizing and building assets alone. Another way for us to talk about this opportunity is that of emissions. Again, if we're talking about how excited we are with decarbonization of transportation, this is at 23% of all of emissions globally. But I want to pull your attention to this piece of the pie, which sits 5% higher, which is what we can directly impact, which is building operations. So it's nothing to be super proud of that we have more emissions than other industries, but we do know as well that the bigger the problem, typically we also have a bigger opportunity. And this only gets hammered home further by the fact that right now in the United States, only 13% of our energy usage is coming from renewable energy. This really highlights the impact of reducing and managing our energy consumption. And I would argue that those in this room, you are more knowledgeable than 95% of the population on energy and energy management. And this is a big responsibility, because when we're kids and there's a big problem, we're always looking around the room to try and find the adult in the room. And I'm here today to say that the problem is truly at a global scale, and you, with your knowledge, are those adults who are going to help guide everyone around us in this transition. In doing so and helping your customers manage their emissions, you're going to help improve their ESG ratings, you're going to help them reduce all of our collective reliance on foreign energy, and then also improve the intelligent use of our energy, such as energy storage and peak load avoidance. Another term that you might hear as we're talking about sustainability and ESG is that of net zero. If you're not familiar with this term, this simply means companies and organizations trying to get their emissions down to zero by a specific date. These dates tend to be a little bit further out, so 2040, quite commonly 2050. And so when you're talking to your customers, one of the questions that they might have is, well, what technology is even going to be available decades from now? Which is why it is so important that when you're considering what technology you're working with, to think of those solutions that are both open and connected to land those opportunities that are really truly future-proofed. In doing so and having that future-proof technology, you're reducing time wasted, but also landfill. And then there's this additional piece. You've heard a lot about data over the past 2 days. This is such an important part of our journey as an industry. We're very familiar with how to use data in terms of energy and energy reduction, but it's also going to help us on this next phase, which you could possibly view as a challenge, but we know regulations are coming out. Last year, it got announced that the SEC is looking at putting pressure on large companies to formally report our emissions. So when we do talk about emissions, this might also be, if you're not familiar with the breakdown of the different types of emissions, an opportunity after this to go research a little bit, but they will be requiring large companies to report formally on an annual basis and can be audited on their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So again, the access that you have to this information is going to be key as your customers are being challenged to meet these regulation requirements. It's a big opportunity for all of us in this room. So while that garage sale I had in my parents' driveway is now coming up on 30 years ago this summer, my commitment to leaving this planet in a better place for the next generation has been unwavering. What has changed, though, is my understanding as to who is going to do this. The private sector is now our best hope in terms of decarbonizing the economy at the pace that we need it to happen. And we in this room, our companies and our industry are uniquely positioned to do this and to turn this problem into an opportunity. We really do have an opportunity to be the adults in the room and to do well by doing good. So now we're going to turn it over to our panel. We're going to help give real concrete examples of those opportunities for each and every one of you in this room. We're going to start with some introductions, turn it over to a Q&A. But I know this is a relatively new concept that we're chatting about, so if you do have questions, we're going to have a mic that we're going to be running around as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig.
Thank you, Lauren. Can you guys hear me in the back? Are you guys going to do the slides that Lauren for? Oh, thanks. All right, hi everybody. My name's Craig Stevenson. I'm with the Oros Group. The Oros Group is an owner's performance advocate, and we help building owners reach those goals of zero carbon. And what I want to do today is talk about that a little bit. When we talk about zero carbon, we're talking about operational carbon. We're talking about greenhouse gas emissions. We're talking about energy consumption in its simplest form. This is what we're talking about today. And this is a math problem. This is a math problem that's being solved throughout the world today, and we're on a lot of very large projects that are reaching these levels of performance. To do it, it requires emerging building science and data science. We can't get there with building science alone, and we can't get there with data science alone. As great as we're seeing a lot of optimization being done in this room and controls and starting to take waste out of the system, it's not going to fundamentally transform a building's performance to reach the climate level performance we need those buildings to meet. If you consider Local Law 97 in New York, BERTA in Boston, and other laws that are sweeping across the nation, optimization and data science in a silo by itself is not going to get us there. We have to fundamentally change the building. That's the building science part of it. And what we're talking about is load reduction in its simplest form. What is load reduction? We define it as the natural order of sustainability. This is logical. It just makes sense. We want to reduce our loads, then we want to deal with our active systems, and then we want to have discussion on renewables. It's not that we're devaluing renewables. Renewables are a very important conversation at the right time. If we do this right, we won't spend a premium. Once we violate the natural order of sustainability, we will always pay a premium for to rectify that. So what does that mean, passive first? Passive first means there is a building science component to the envelope of our buildings. Code in this climate zone calls for an R18 in my walls, which is legally the worst building I'm allowed to build. Getting to a climate level performance is closer to an R30. That inflection point where the insulation stops paying and I can go to an R400 and it just doesn't matter anymore. We use building science to understand what the passive elements in the building should be, and we help building owners understand how to implement them. New construction is easy, existing construction requires phasing. Once we do that, we've reduced our loads to the maximum allowable, maximum building science level of performance. To put it in perspective, code-based building may operate around 100 kBTU per square foot per year. It's a site EUI. Passive house is at a 14, without process load. That's the difference, going with passive first. Active second, if we do passive first, right, we typically see active systems being decoupled. We're dealing with our ventilation with one strategy with a highly efficient energy recovery core, and our heating and cooling systems open up to new scenarios we never considered. VRF becomes affordable because our loads are so low. It's a really efficient system. We usually don't use it in commercial construction because it's just too expensive. Once we reduce our loads, those sorts of systems start opening themselves up and become available. That's where building optimization comes into play, because now I can start to bring out all the other waste in the system. Renewables last, very simple. I want my photovoltaic array to be this big, and not this big, not that big. I want my offsets to be simpler. I want to be able to get to zero. I can get to zero from a 14 EUI way easier than I can a 100 EUI. That's the natural order of sustainability. When I buy it like that, I'll pay a premium. Insulation is always cheaper than systems. Same thing applies to carbon. When we think about carbon, a lot of people get very confused and think like, oh my God, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, what the hell is it? What is carbon? I don't understand it. It's very simple. There are two types of carbon to make up a building. Operational carbon, that's the energy consumed in a building, and embodied carbon, that's the materials that go in the building. For the purposes of this conversation today, we're talking about operational carbon. And there's a natural order of sustainability as it applies to carbon as well, as you can see up behind me. And with that, I'll pass it over to John.
So it's interesting, Craig hits on everything. I'm an operations guy, vice president of engineering for Bedrock, 110 buildings, 20 million plus square foot. Pretty wide ranging portfolio from high-rise, first-class office, low-rise office parks, residential, industrial, lots of retail. So it's pretty interesting to hear these thoughts. And coming from an operations background, we're the team that gets handed these buildings to run. We need programs, sustainability programs, but normally would be based on how well do we take care of the fixed equipment and operate these buildings for our most important tenants, et cetera, and for the building owner to take care of their asset. But it's evolved. It's evolved in the years that I've been in the industry, and sustainability has become a larger and larger part. I wanted to share a story. We changed CEOs, changed our entire C-level about 2.5 years ago, and our new CEO came in, Cohen Bonner. And I had been pushing for the green credits for, you talked about a little bit about that. DTE has a program where I can buy either solar or wind power for them, green credits, certain percentage of the, you have to sign up for the program, certain percentage of your portfolio's electrical use. And I've been pushing for that for 1.5 years. And it just couldn't get past, the leadership. It wasn't in their minds. Kofi came in and said, look, I met with this gentleman 2 weeks after he started. I laid out my business plans. Right in the meeting, he says, why aren't we doing it now? I was shocked, So that C-level, that top-down approach to sustainability has to be there to be successful. So we put that in place, and before we left that meeting, he said, my goal is to have Bedrock Real Estate be the go-to real estate company everybody looks at for what are they doing sustainability-wise. So it's been a fun 2.5 years. We've hired sustainability teams, director of sustainability. We've got a development team. We're running, we're retrofitting, and we're building ground-up buildings now. So it has to be at every facet of what you do with your buildings. You had asked a question earlier about what are the opportunities to find more efficiency in operating the buildings. Well, research, right? You had mentioned earlier, listen, new technology exists for everything from mechanical to water, materials, we talked about that, insulation, even listen. There are content experts, like on this panel, out there. This is what they do. You have to lean on everybody and talk to everybody about how you can tweak things. If your building is efficient, how do I tweak it to get more efficient? There are programs out there. Some of the things that hurt us this year, the economy is really, really tough for these buildings, to get some funding, sustainability. Sometimes if you have when you're building it, if you're smart, you bring that sustainable design at the very beginning, which we do with your architects, with your designs, with your MEPs, et cetera, all the way up through. If you can get a hold of that and have standards, which we do, we have smart building specs, smart MEP spec, et cetera, that we feed our architects and mechanical engineers to say, this is how you're going to build it, let's talk about how you're going to fit this in our development. When you have 50 buildings that you purchased that were up and running, older equipment, now things are starting to fail, you have to also have an equipment life cycle management plan that, when I'm changing out 2 cooling towers in 2 of my buildings this year as an example, and there's technology now, and it's not just standard cooling tower. TowerTech is a brand I'm using. We did the math, it's about a 30% savings on water, chemical, all these things that are environmental, energy savings, etc. So those are the things you have to fold into it as well. And then, I think the last step for us is education. There's a lot of education out there. Once again, a lot smarter people in this in the sustainability field than me. I'm an operations guy. We've got a great team. You have to build it in your team. But listen, there's a lot of education available. Breakfast, I was talking to someone who was giving education on BMS training and sustainability training. We're going to grab their information. I don't know what it's never ending. So for those types of things, that's your value. Look at your HVAC, your lighting. Those are all simple things. You water, you save all that. How you build it. If you have the opportunity, like we do, we're doing lots of ground up as well as standard operation. Educate your folks. Constantly look at it and run with it. It's and I lean on folks who are the content experts. Become partners. It's the last step. I want to say this. You have to become partners with your contractors and with your content expert specialists out there. You bring them in. You'd ask the question: how can they come to someone like myself or our sustainability team? Listen, you walk in with an efficiency-first mindset because ultimately, I have to sell this to my chief financial officer, chief investment officer for any program, right, a business case. Come in with an efficiency first, come in understanding the portfolio that a customer has, and bring your successes in that type of portfolio so that I can smooth it and run it through and push it to the very top to get the funding. It seems simple and basic, but it's ever-changing. Great example, DTE, I'm looking at their headquarters over there. I know they've done phenomenal things that they're building. They have programs now that they can present you and pay for free that you can use. I'm doing 2 of them. I'm kind of their guinea pig. They came to me and said, can we try this out with Bedrock? You've got a lot of buildings in Detroit. One of them is a program where they'll do retro commissioning on your buildings. It's a prepaid program. Anywhere between 40 and 80 grand is what this would cost. They hire an energy consultant, once again, someone who knows this very well, works through them. They bring them in, we meet, we share information, we walk through. We'll go through a building. I'm running one right now on campus Marshes. It's a 1.5 million square foot building. I think the estimate was 2 million kWh, I may say, by the end of this. And some of it, because we have a controls team in-house, we're doing in-house. They bring us these recommendations, and they'll give you up to 40 grand to pay for some of this, but we do it in-house. So that's another plus. And then we fold it into our BMS system. Vitally important to have a strong BMS. The other one is there's a program where they'll drive up a bank of batteries, tie it into your system. We're doing it at one of our newer buildings we bought. And what they'll do is the thing will be loaded up, and during peak hours, up to 2 megs for a 3-hour period, they'll pull you off of peak, and they'll run your building on these battery banks. Saves us money, right? Takes off the grid for them. That's an issue as well. So there are a lot of those programs out there that are free. Research, find them. In a down economy, it'll be a savior for sustainability.
Thanks, John. Raneem?
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Raneem Shamas. I'm a software program manager at Modern Agra. Modern Agra is based kind of seeing how we can service our clients and help them in delivering a building that is run efficiently, that is run on a path to decarbonization. Canada's a bit different than the States. We don't have such stringent laws or states that are popping up saying we need to get to a specific goal by 2030 or by 2040, so we are kind of tied down with the carbon tax and carbon credit programs that aren't as motivational. But we're starting to see clients that are asking for, wanting to see, hey, how can I see the analytics of the building, the metering systems of the building, understand what this influx of data that I have is, and understand how I can run my building better. So we decided to really switch to what we call a data-driven solution. So we're on the controls level, what we're doing is we're making sure that, hey, you have your network health set up, you have your cybersecurity set up, which is really critical in this day and age, you have all your basic foundations set up. And as we move into fault detection and diagnostics, we move into trying to understand what benchmarking looks like, trying to understand what alarm management looks like, and really working with our clients and our owners to, as an education game, just like John said, it is right now all about education, because we don't want to be sitting with the owners saying, hey, this is better than this. It's how can we make your system be the most efficient version of itself it can be before you decide to retrofit it and rip it out and put something new in. That's not really a sustainable method. We need to make sure that we live out the life of systems that we have. You make sure you're running them to maximum capability, and then you move forward from there. And then that moves into our service contracts. So after we hand over a full building, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, we start talking about, okay, there's 2, 3, 4 years into our service contract. If you don't have an ESG team present, then hey, we will provide all that information, all of that data to you. We will help you get there. If you do have an ESG team present and you do have those company-driven goals, then we can work alongside them and say, what do you want to see? How are we switching this? We're no longer just a contracting company, but we're working past that because we see the value in delivering that. We see where the industry is heading. Canada's moving a bit too slow for us, so we're trying to catch up with companies like the States, and we want owners that are based in Europe and in the States to kind of push Canada to move in that direction. Because once you hit 2030, and once Canada starts to catch up, we're going to be falling so behind, and we need the labor, we need the manpower, and that's all a part of the equation, right? We can't just say we want to retrofit all the buildings in Canada to get them on the path on decarbonization, or build new buildings that are going to be LEED certified and well certified. We need to make sure that we're all on the same page. So our role as a subcontractor has shifted, so we're trying to educate our owners and our clients a lot more. We're building that ESG team, we're helping them get set up on that pathway, and we're helping them understand exactly what they need to be doing in order to kind of move in that direction of decarbonization, move in the direction of understanding their buildings and understanding what their building operators need to make sure that they are succeeding.
Thanks, Renee. Now we're going to have a couple of guided questions, but when we get to the end of this, we're definitely going to be turning to the audience, and if you do have any questions that pop up, feel free to raise your hand throughout. So to start us off at a little bit of a higher level, John, you talked about opportunities. What would you say is the biggest opportunity right now in the build space?
You know, what's been successful for us is looking at what you have. Listen, you build. When I started 10 years ago at Bedrock, we had 11 buildings. I had 14 engineers. Now we're at 110, 2 different states. You build out. You know, I think the mantra back in the day was butts and 90 seats. As we were, and yes, you know, 90 days. I want butts and seats, and we built it fast. But we were smart from the beginning to say, all right, I'm going to build it fast, but let's build it smart fast, right? So, you know, but then you have to go back and look at that. It's been 10 years. I've got buildings that I'm doing retro commissionings in right now. Very important to constantly look at what you have, look at the new technology out there, and find partners. You know, find partners. I mentioned it earlier. There could be free programs. There's others that are paid. We hire energy consultants to come in and go through. We hire commissioning agents to come in and go through. Just continue to always look at your systems. You know, we put smart meters in every tenant space, in every mechanical room as we've gone over the last 2.5 years. I mean, I can't control it, and I can't tell you how well I'm doing if I can't see it. We've tied that into the BMS, we've alarmed it, we've looked at, you know, I've got a building that's got 20 floors, each air handler per chiller plant. I might get an alarm that says it's one floor. You know, it's the same tenant throughout the entire building, just one floor is 15% higher on energy, what's going on. I'll send an engineer out, I'll send a controls team out, and we'll find it. So it's constantly watching, using the technology that exists.
And maybe on the flip side of that, what would you say is the biggest obstacle? There's one singular obstacle we're facing as an industry.
If you have a building, we purchased them, that didn't put the money in, didn't put the thought in at the very beginning. They built it cheap, they built it on time, we purchased it, we would have run it, and now going back and trying to put all these great programs that we have written in place is tough. Going back and upgrading systems, putting, I just bought a building, it's a pretty well-known building in Detroit, but it had 10% of BMS in the system. So, I mean, they were controlling some newer stuff they put in, but I couldn't see what was going on in that building. If you had no BMS, you're not tracking, you know, guys going up and hitting the button or putting it on time. So, we had to run back and to ask for a large amount of money to put a BMS in. I had to write a business case for that. While we're doing that, we're putting things in. So that really hurts. That's the hardest part of the down economy. I need $5 million to make this fit our sustainability standards. Sometimes you're going to get it, sometimes you're not.
Got it, thank you. And Craig, I'm curious, when you're out in the field, is there one common misconception that tends to bubble up every time when we're talking about decarbonizing our built space?
Yeah, absolutely. Building off of what John just said, going into a building and trying to get a standard around his systems. I mean, think about this. We're the only industry in the free world that will invest $100 million into an asset and not have a clue about how it's supposed to perform. That's crazy. We do it all day long, right? When we don't create a plan, guess what we're doing? We're building the code. And that's what we have to change, right? So John's talking about building a plan around systems in buildings. That's important. But let's click it up a level if we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and carbon and those goals we want to meet. Where's my plan there? We can build a plan around that. This idea of poking and hoping and incrementalism is not a plan, right? We replaced all of our light fixtures. What's next? We replaced all of our variable frequency drives. What's next? We optimized our building. What's next? You have to have a plan on how you want to get to the level of goals you want to get to. It's a solvable problem. You just have to operationalize your energy model. And doing that requires that you do a first couple steps to get there, right? Establish an owner's project requirements, which is a set of goals for that building. Performance-based goals against all criteria of performance, not just energy, but indoor air quality, light, sound, material toxicity, waste, water. You have to build your plan. So you have to have a comprehensive owner's project requirements. Then you have to inform whole building energy model that's operationalized so you understand how to get to where you're going to go, and you need to see all that data transparently. Incidentally, that's why I'm in this room. We're doing that within systems today. We're taking simulation that's been operationalized and calibrated, and we're ingesting it back into the digital twin. Why is that important? Because the context we use today to determine whether we're good, better, or different is historical data, or it's comps. I'm interested in that for exactly 10 seconds and I get really bored and I move on because it tells me nothing. Owners are asking us a question, did I get what I paid for? Did I get to the goal I want? And did I get what I paid for? And there's only one way to answer that question. So to me, yes, there's absolutely a way to do this. You have to create a plan and then you have to inform the team. And to John's point, you have to educate. You got to make sure everybody understands this. This idea of optimization of buildings and renewables are extremely important, but if you don't follow the plan at first, you're going to pay a premium, as I said in my intro.
Maybe just to extend that thought, if someone in this room is approaching a project and they're looking at getting to net zero for that building, if it's a new building versus a retrofit, how do you tackle that differently?
So new buildings are easy, just like when you talk about putting technology into a new building, there's no legacy to deal with. I can just basically create my standard and do the right thing. Same thing with new buildings. If you understand building efficiency and how to respect the natural sustainability, new buildings are easy. There's a project in Boston, I was just telling John about, it's called Winthrop Towers. It was built by MP Boston, it topped out last year, it's the 3rd tallest building in Boston. It's a passive house. It's performing 14 EUI, you can Google it, you can look at it. This is what's happening all over the country, it's happening all over the place. And when John presented at our conference and talked about it, he said, I'm gonna build this building, and by the time it goes operational, it's obsolete because of BERTA, our local laws. Then I have to basically go in there post-construction and retrofit a brand new building. That's insane. He says, why not just build a better building? And that's what he did. So to me, that's what's happening right now. Existing is more challenging, no doubt about it. And no one wants to pay a premium, no one wants to worry about brand new windows. But again, create your plan. And if you create your plan, then you can respect the natural triggers in a building. Life cycle. Stuff breaks and I want to replace it. I can either replace it in kind, which is a definition of insanity, or I can start to change and transform my buildings. So respect life cycle, natural renovations, deferred maintenance, all those trigger opportunities that I'm going to touch something anyways and do the right thing. And if you have a plan, then you can execute. So existing is a little bit more difficult, but fundamentally the process is the exact same. Set my goals, develop a plan, execute my strategy. Now it may take me in an existing building 5 or 10 years to get there, but I'm going to get there. Today, if you don't have a plan, you're replacing in kind. That is the definition of insanity, and you will never transform your buildings.
Thanks, Craig. Randy, we were talking earlier about net zero, and this is quite far out, but I think there's already a lot that we can do with technology that is available today. How do you think that we can best leverage existing technology to get to those ambitious net zero goals for the built space?
I think that's the critical thing, is understanding what is already happening in your building. We see a lot of owners that come in and they want to do these massive renovations, they want to do these massive retrofits, and a lot of times we're bound by bid specs, so we just go in, we retrofit the space, and we leave. But a lot of the times when the owners are coming to us direct, we're saying, hey, we want to be able to take a look at our building, understand what's happening. Well, why is my energy consumption like this? Why are my utilities looking like this? And the moment we start looking into their spaces, understand the data, get them to understand how their occupants are behaving, with the existing technology, instead of just ripping everything out, putting in shiny new custom solutions, which when you want to replace them 10, 20 years down the line, you have to do another whole change instead of just being able to plug and play with different solutions as you're learning how to optimize your building. Again, it's an education game. You understand what is existing in your building. You understand your current data, you centralize it so that everybody has a proper view in what they need to see and how they need to develop. And you take that and you move forward with it. We can't just keep swapping things and changing things and coming in with this brand new technology without understanding why our current technology isn't working, or how we can make it work as fast as it can and live it out to the end of its life, instead of just swapping it out. And again, you're increasing your carbon emissions at some points. So it's always important to understand your current buildings, understand your current technology, and if you're using it properly, and then you're able to move forward with a new plan.
You touched on it briefly, but I would love for you to dive in deeper. This concept of centralizing data, what kind of role does that play, especially in influencing all the different stakeholders to achieve net zero?
Yeah, we see this all the time, is that you have different teams within a company that each of them is holding on to their own data sets, their own pieces of data, they're not sharing that information. Or sometimes one of your buildings is running and you're missing a critical piece of what's going on in it. And we've realized, and I think this is key as you all start moving into your scope 1, scope 2, gathering all that emissions data, is that when you start seeing fully all of your information, all of your data in one location, each team in your company is going to be able to perform better, to have better plans, better goals, understand what currently exists, instead of having duplications of efforts across the companies. We were seeing this as when we were implementing things in our buildings internally, we were treating ourselves as a client, and we said, hey, we have 25 different facilities, and we want to see if we were to get them on the path of decarbonization, ESG, what would that look like? Some of them are owned, some of them are rented, and as we're moving along and forward with it, we're saying, this is what it would look like to a client of ours as they're moving things in. Where is our data sitting? Who has it? Who has ownership over this? Did a person leave and they have all the login information? Or do we have proper IT systems to protect all of this? So understanding where your data sits to be able to view it, to give the right teams the right levels of access for them to be able to perform their planning, their strategic goals better, is the key part in all this.
Completely agree. When we're reading the news right now, it seems like there's equal coverage of the need for sustainability and ESG, but then also a pending or if not current recession, certainly economic turmoil. John, when you're, over the years of your career, did the way you approach sustainability, did you adapt depending on the current state of the economy, or does your message and approach remain the same throughout?
Yes, it's, once again, getting the buy-in and getting the funding was important. But now, we also have a fiduciary responsibility to, increase our net operating income for our building owners, right? So things have changed. We've been lucky in Bedrock to start off with the smart spec and smart standards for everything from your MEP build to your operations, equipment lifecycle management. But it's ever changing, right? I mean, you have repair, maintenance, supply budgets. You also have capital project budgets to replace things. You have to be smart to watch what you're putting in, constantly do your research and go. I'll give you an example. So when we created a sustainability team, it kind of grew. So there's a leader, and then you have buckets under each one. I'm an operations bucket, and I have certain things under my responsibility that I have to report up. You talked about tracking. It's so important to track, right? We do EUI studies annually on all of our buildings, pick the top 5 that are worst, not 5, worst 5, whatever you want to say, and we attack it. All right, is that in the capital budget, or maybe I adjust my budget for that building this year? Can I push this one for the next 2 years so I can at least, hit sustainability and keep within our spend? But we talked a little bit about this, and there are lots of other programs. We've had to get really creative with how to keep moving forward with our sustainability. And it's a lot of the free programs, like I mentioned with DTE, they're not the only ones, that we're talking about. These are all free programs. The 2 that I mentioned, they're paying for it. I've done 7 retro commissionings through this DTE program. Anywhere from 40 to 80 grand was the cost with an outside engineering firm. They paid for it. I got the credits back, I got the rebates back, and I got the energy savings back, right? And it didn't really cost us anything. So getting creative like that to keep moving down the sustainability path is important. And then we also rolled into getting content experts within the company. We spend some money on getting specific certifications, specific education for folks that we can do some things now in-house. And when they're here and they're doing it for you constantly, that makes a difference too.
Thank you. And Craig, I would love to know, are there any kind of no regrets actions that people can take, even if you are heading into some economic uncertainties, just like a clear takeaway that those in the audience can take with them and feel confident with that next step?
Yeah, I think so. I think that creating that plan is a no regrets move, both from a building technology plan and a building performance plan. Is definitely a no regrets move. But when I look out into this room here, and I want to talk directly to most of you people, and said you're thinking about how do I get engaged early on a project, right? How do I become, instead of third tier, I have a voice in the conversation? How do I move up and get into a position where I can negotiate? You have to contribute real value to the goals that we're setting here. I'm an owner's performance advocate. I'm the one that's basically on these projects and making these decisions in team building. There's a paradigm shift that has to happen, right? So think about that. 90% of the work that we're doing in high performance buildings is happening in early schematic development. It's not happening in design development and construction documents. It's happening early. You guys are familiar with it because you understand that if I don't think about this stuff early, it never happens, right? If I don't do a converged network in SD, I'm never doing it in operations because that's just not going to happen. You can't afford it. It's going to always be a premium. Building science is the exact same thing. When I'm talking about changing the R value of my wall from an R18 to an R30, if I don't get involved until DD, those architects have locked in all the drawings. All my corridors are set, my bathrooms are set, I can't move the building. Now all of a sudden I can't reduce my loads. That's the paradigm shift, and this is what this room needs to understand, is that everyone talks about integrated project delivery, and everyone talks about the value of lean construction and bringing in the experts into the space early to contribute to the conversations. How are you contributing to the conversation? If you're adding value to it, I'm looking for you. And I want you guys involved in that conversation early. Because I would argue, Lauren, that building a smart building doesn't cost any more money
than the buildings we're building today based on code. This has the same operational technologies or OTs. I have a BAS, I have a lighting control system, I have a security system. They're all siloed and they don't talk to each other. Now, what if I changed that system? Instead of buying A, I bought B, and all of a sudden I can start integrating back to my building. Is it going to cost me a premium to do that? No. It's going to require getting through a learning curve, having the right team built to do this, but I would argue that it's not going to cost a premium. The same conversation happens in building sites. Can't tell you how many owners come up to us and say, I want to build a passive house. How much more is it going to cost me? I'm like, you're loading the question. Why did you load the question? Why do you think it's going to cost more? Insulation is always cheaper than systems, if done right. Now, there is a learning curve, no doubt. But if you have the right team and you're doing it the right way first, you can get to these levels of performance if you have the right integration. It's not integration, we had a meeting, check, we're good. It's having a meeting and having people contribute real value to that conversation. I wanted to speak to the room today because you guys have a voice in this conversation. How are you guys doing it? Are you calculating your greenhouse gas emissions within your technologies? Are you enabling that? Are you providing integration to data so that we can have all of our data in front of it? Are you giving us the ability to bring our simulation, hourly data into your platform so we can use it as a higher level of context? That's what's happening in this market right now, and this is where we need to elevate. We need to elevate the room because we have the smarts, we have the technology, we just need to make sure we have the integration out.
Absolutely. And I do think it is this delicate pull and push in terms of sustainability. Certainly we're seeing, Scott mentioned earlier that I came up through way of BizTech controls, and we are seeing, especially with our operations in Europe, some of our largest customers putting an enormous amount of pressure on us as manufacturers to start reporting on our environmental performance. Not only, we can no longer rely on the fact that our products help in terms of energy and energy usage, we also have to look internally at our operations and what are we doing as an organization. So this has put a lot of pressure on us in a good way, I would say. But I'm wondering, Raneem, as for Modern Niagara, can we talk about what that external pressure might look on your own organization and kind of your approach to net zero?
Yeah, so as a contractor right now, until we get to that owner direct 100% of the time, we get a lot of bids that ask us, how are your internal operations? What does your waste management look like? How's your ESG? Do you have LEED certification? How are your buildings? And that puts a lot of pressure. We can take that to the C-suite and say, well, owners are asking for this, but what we're not seeing is that there's no follow through with that as we get to the sites. It's kind of like a check mark box for them, and we're saying, well, when we get to these sites, it's so essential to maintain these operations because they help us build better. They help our teams understand why ESG is important and why we should carry that through. And up until, again, our government kind of catches up with all that and starts putting that external pressure, the pressure has to come from the owners, and that's why we're saying it's an education game. They have to apply that pressure. They have to tell us that this is what they want to see. The construction industry is really lagging behind in catching up on getting to decarbonization, on getting to net zero, on even setting their goals, signing SBTI or UNGC or anything global for that matter. They absolutely need to apply that pressure. And then when we see that happening, when we get to these sites where we do have proper waste management, where we do have utility monitoring, and we're understanding what our metering looks like as on our operational level, we start seeing that, hey, even our labor force is starting to suggest ways of becoming more environmentally friendly, reducing our carbon intake. These are some of the most innovative people that we have seen because they've been working in this industry for so long, and just trickling down these orders over to them does not allow them to actually see why it's happening. But once they see the full site collaborating, you start coming up with amazing ideas. This isn't necessarily control specific, but we've recycled harnesses into tool bags because somebody suggested it, right? And that had such a huge contribution to landfill. So allowing people to understand why and administering that pressure and having it come from the owners where they're saying, I want to walk onto my job and know that we are doing everything that we can to make it run efficiently. We are not producing any waste or very minimal waste. Helps everybody understand that at the same level.
I'd like to expand, if I could, both on Craig and Naeem's points. It's a boots on the ground guy. That's what I call myself because, number one, we get it handed to run, and we run with a large team. But also with Bedrock, our philosophy is they allow folks like myself to get involved at the very beginning of these jobs. And so we help design, we share our smart specs, we put things in place. But then what's probably just as important, and I think Greg, you mentioned it, Hudson site down the street. We're building this thing, we've been building it for a while. We designed this building 3.5, 4 years ago, put things into place. As we were moving through the process, I realized there were some more efficient pieces of equipment that could go in. I had the opportunity to change it, went to the construction folks, made some adjustments, and we swapped out, towers, some more efficient chillers, things like that. We were able to do that. I mean, if we would have put it in, it would have been somewhat obsolete by the time we got this building running in another year and a half. But more importantly, some of those things came from contractor partners in the field. I see a couple folks I do a lot of work with here, and the most important part for an operations person like me is you know your business, you know what's going on, you're there day-to-day building this, you get handed a spec to build. And I've had some of my more trusted contractor partners come to me and say, hey John, it's been designed this way, they've got us putting this in, but you and I talked about it in another area, we did this is going to be a little more efficient, do you really want to go this way? I get to take that information, run back to our design and construction team and say, we've got the time, let's change that. So getting that feedback, we have a strong MSI on the integration side who does all of our BMS work. These are the folks that I walk up to and say, can I? Should we? They'll run with it, come back. We'll do beta tests on the building for newer technology. Greg, we talked about this. We've got some great programs running. And it's just from asking that question or them coming to us and asking the question, hey, John, you've got this. I think we could try this. So getting that feedback from our content expert community is just as important for an operations person.
Thank you. Scott did make the error of selecting a sustainability nerd up here, so I can talk to this panel all day, but I open it up if anybody does have any questions. If not, I just see one at the back. I know we have a mic coming to you. There you go.
Great panel, thank you. With ESG tracking, I know there's legislation, but is there any industry standards? What can consulting engineers do? What can vendors such as ourselves on the software side pre-build some of this into our software so it's already there when the building opens up?
I could take the first swing at this if you don't mind. So yes, there is. So there is energy disclosure ordinance. That's the first step in cities starting to transform their own buildings. Normally, energy disclosure ordinance is going to require building owners to disclose annual consumption of energy defined by site energy use intensity, source energy use intensity, total cost, and greenhouse gas emissions. You can embed those calculations in your technology and create an easy button for these owners. If you can get to the data, if you can't get to the data, you can create an API to the utility, get to the data, and still be able to calculate that. There's an emerging metric that's coming out as we speak. And I would direct most of you guys to blockcarbon.com, their website. They're doing hourly greenhouse gas emission calculations. That is important because the mission of Block Carbon is to open up a building efficiency credit market very similar to the renewable energy credit or the REC market. And they're doing it for buildings. Buildings that do decarbonize should be able to monetize the delta. That is an hourly calculation. In the United States, it's a matter of taking in the balancing authority and the state T&Ds, transmission and distribution losses, and doing a calculation. If you reach out to me, I can share the methodology with you, and I can share with you the websites that I would recommend that you take a look at. But that's the carbon accounting that you need to pay attention to. If we can get an easy button for everybody in this room to get to that carbon accounting, that BEC market is going to open up very quickly.
Renee, did you have something you wanted to add there as well?
Yeah, so something not as specific as just capturing that, but if your clients are operating at a global level, a lot of people are signing, companies are signing commitments with the United Nations, or signing the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So learn what these need to be in order to deliver on them properly, because as they're going global, they're signing commitments that are not just saying net zero carbon, they're saying absolutely no carbon. So on a global level, for the United Nations to be able to take them in and say, hey, this is your badge, this is what you need to deliver, absolutely, these are the guidelines that we need to follow. And sometimes they're not necessarily specific to the construction industry, but a lot of companies are signing them, and they are looking for vendors that fall under that. So that's a critical piece to it.
Is there anything you want to add there, John? Okay. Any more questions in the audience? One up front here. The mic's coming.
So could you touch quickly on, I don't think everyone knows what the motivation is for companies with the ESG scores and what the motivation penalties, et cetera, et cetera. What's going to make them want to, Bedrock does this because they want. They're not, and they're probably in this area the most proactive people I've ever heard. What about other companies, larger companies that they don't have it, how the business functions. I mean, that some people, they don't want to invest in this. The bottom line is really truly all that matters for them. So what is it, the Security Exchange Commission is handling ESG? So,
In terms of the annual regulations, correct?
okay, so what is the motivation, penalties, et cetera, for companies with their ESG scores?
Well, I think, well, you said it well. I mean, we do it because we want to be good sustainability partners, right? We push the envelope because that's what we want to be. But just experience in other companies and even other municipalities, it all depends on the municipality. We've got properties, a bunch in downtown Cleveland, a bunch here, and previous life before Bedrock, I had properties around the country. One that come to mind is Charlotte. Charlotte came up with, through the municipality program, where they acquired the buildings. They paid for it. They worked with the DTE of Charlotte there, and they had buildings in the downtown quarter, certain areas. They had to mount these TVs in their, had 3 buildings there, in their lobbies. Had to put smart metering on and track it to show the value of how this building was being efficient. So I would say that, to your point, I would hope that a lot of the larger real estate companies would want to just do it right and start doing research and getting involved. But depending on the municipality, there are some that have specific requirements. I know Detroit's working around that. I've been trying to do it here for years. I did it when I was in Southfield at Southfield Town Center out there. Something as simple as putting deduct meters on your cooling towers and your irrigation. That saves the company money, but it also helps you track your water, and it was a free program. Just started that program off with the city of Detroit. They created a sustainability council. And they're working with folks like us to say, what can we put in place? All new builds that are going to go on in Detroit. Could we use Bedrock as an example? What are you doing? So they're all working towards that. They have their own requirements within their city and their sustainability to do that. And I think it's going to eventually grow out to everybody. So it depends on the municipality.
Pass it over to Craig as well, and I'll just add one thing. I mean, we're just certainly seeing it. So Acuity Brands are a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. There is a lot of pressure from the investor community as well. So as much as it is a carrot and a stick with regulations, there is this halo effect of actually doing well by doing good, because there is a lot of pressure from the investor community. I would also say we're seeing a lot of the next generation when we're talking about labor shortage, and we're trying to be attractive and stand out from those tech companies, stand out from other options. Part of it is being a good corporate citizen, and we're seeing that with new associates coming in across all of our different offices as well. So Craig.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is if you look at the evolution of sustainability from the 1970s to today, where we're at, it started with, these people that were involved in activism, right? And they just wanted to do because they knew it was the right thing to do. Then it went to prescriptive criteria, things like LEED. Do this and you'll get that. Doesn't really work that way, but that was prescriptive criteria. Then it went to performance-based criteria, things like well building standard, international living building standard, passive housing. Now, today, it's at outcome-based criteria. That's where we're at today. So if you look at New York City's Local 197, Boston Asperta, they exist. And the way they get there is they start the governmental agencies with energy disclosure ordinance. Hey community, just tell me what your energy usage is for all buildings over 50,000 square feet. Then they say all city-owned buildings must comply with zero energy compliance. Then they say, now you must comply because we've just demonstrated it can be done. That's what's happening across the United States, and that's what's sweeping. That's the stick. We don't really focus on the stick. There's a carrot out there. And the carrot out there is there's a reason for people doing this. I'm involved in a project in Texas. It is 5 buildings, over 1 million square foot total. all passive house construction, all smart buildings. Why are they doing that? They're a developer. They exist to make a profit, right? They're a for-profit organization. They did it because there's access to capital. When you talk about the SEC, their primary equity investor is doing it because they can decarbonize their investment dollars, and they found this developer who's actually doing it. And now all of a sudden they can develop this property with this partner. Otherwise they could never have done that. If you guys are going to go to the Realcomm conference, just a short plug, there's going to be a presentation on that project there with the equity investor, the developer, and the offsite contractor, all around the smart building technology and the zero carbon initiative. So there is a care out there. There's plenty of money out there for this work.
Thank you, Craig. We are at the end of time. We're going to be hanging around a little bit this morning. You see our names, titles, companies. Find us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to connect and share any way we can afterwards as well. So thank you to our entire panel.